Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 2021 Young Leaders Conference. I hope everybody has enjoyed the content up until this point. My name is Joe LaPointe. I serve on the Young Leaders Board and happy to be with everybody today. Just to kind of give you a summary of where we have been up until now and where we are going tomorrow. Hope to see everybody live at the in-person session tomorrow. And of course, we could do none of this without our sponsors. So huge thanks to all of our sponsors. With that being said, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speakers. Today we have Michelle and Michael with us. Michelle is a market leader for the Michigan and the Northwest Ohio offices of Willis Towers Watson. They're one of the most diverse offices in the chain. Starting right out of college, she rose to the ranks of, actuarial analysis, to be the first female to hold this role in the 70 plus years of the firm. Michelle serves on boards with numerous organizations, including the Special Olympics, the Detroit Economic Club, and Walsh College. In 2019, Michelle was recognized by Crain's Detroit as a recipient of their renowned Notable Women in HR Award. Michelle is a dedicated lead by example practitioner, embedding inclusion, diversity into her firm's culture and everything she does. Michelle, we're glad to have you here.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here.
Originally from the south side of Chicago, Michael has an unusually unique career that has given him quite a diverse array of life experiences. Starting as a state trooper and climbing to the ranks of a homicide investigator, and then later moving to a second career in consulting, where he has spent the last 21 years. 10 of these years were spent in the Southeast Asian region. Michael has benefited from sharing a penchant for open minds with people in power who value talent, capability over color and pedigree. He now works directly with C-suite leadership teams across the world on their complex people, risk, and capital strategies. He is successful today because of people who listened, mentored, coached him over the years. And as a result of many difficult conversations, Michael gives back by doing the same for the benefit of others. Michael, thank you for being part of today's conversation.
Joe, thank you. Thank you for having us. So again, Joe, thank you. And hopefully everyone can hear me. Christina, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. So I'm trying to keep up with Michelle because I think her background in diversity and inclusion is much deeper and much more fantastic than mine, but I'm thrilled to be presenting with her today and happy to be with you all. This is not my normal, I'll call it sexy voice. I am a bit ill today, so my voice is a little deeper than usual. If you have any difficulty hearing anything that I say or misunderstand something, please stop us and ask a question. I think Christina can help us manage that. But Michelle and I will tag team this today. If you flip to the first slide, Michelle, I think this conversation we're having today it couldn't be more relevant. Today's social climate provides us all an opportunity, and that opportunity is to better understand each other. And what I want you to do, and I'm hopeful all of you all can see the slides, is I want you to take a second to read each one of the headlines on this slide. And I want you to quickly go to how you feel about it. Don't think about it. Don't think rationally about it. Just go to how you feel immediately. How do you feel about each headline? And I'm going to give you a couple seconds to read them. So the point here is each headline likely induced a visceral reaction from each one of us, either for or against the position. Our reactions are driven in large part by our own experiences and our own biases. And the opportunity in today's environment is not to hunker down on our own beliefs, but it's to better understand why others' beliefs may differ from ours. And this is especially true for leaders in a business environment, because in business environment, when we're leaders, we are working every single day with people who have a variety of opinions. And we have to learn how to manage and accept those opinions. Now, when you're thinking about these conversations and you think about diversity and inclusion, it doesn't matter whether or not you agree or disagree with each one of the positions on this page or any other of the million positions that'll come up throughout your career. What's important is that you try to understand through the lens of the other's point of view why they feel the way they feel about a topic or the position that they're taking. And it's only when you do that that you can truly have conversations rather than just arguments. Michelle, can you flip to the next slide?
You bet. Thanks, Michael. So let's think about this. You know, we call this session Inclusive and Brave Conversations, which implies there's something to be brave about, right? There's a risk. And often when we have some of these conversations with folks, we're left feeling uncomfortable and we don't really know why we're uncomfortable. And so we find it's helpful that if we take a few minutes and try to pinpoint what feelings make us uncomfortable, it allows us to start to address it and to start to think about it. So Christina's going to put a poll up there for us. Just take a moment. And when you think about having inclusive and brave conversations, what makes you uncomfortable? You're afraid of what? And select all the ones that apply.
Thanks, Michelle. I just want to also let everyone know that all of the responses are anonymous, as we don't have anyone registered through Zoom. So we really hope that you feel this is a safe space for you to select one of the options or multiple options.
And Christina, I can't see the poll, so if you could give me a sense of when it's close to being done, that would be great.
Absolutely. We're at about 70% completed out of the attendees. So let's just give it a couple more seconds, if you don't mind, and I will share the results as soon as we're done.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the results are displayed on the screen. Michael, can you see them?
I can, and Michelle, the top two were offending others at 56%, not knowing enough about the subject at hand was 71%, and then kind of a distant third was 46% as others misunderstanding my position.
Great, great. So, but what underlines all of those is fear, right? And so what we want to do today is we acknowledge these are tough. We acknowledge they make you uncomfortable, but we also feel really strongly they're important. We could all just kind of cower back and not have the conversation. And so what Michael and I want to do today is we want to give you a couple of different ways to think about things, to maybe make them a little less uncomfortable, to make you a little more comfortable, to maybe pivot your perspective on how you're looking at the conversation so you feel more comfortable having them. And then we want to give you a few tools that you can put in your toolkit so that you can be better at these going forward. Because I think, you know, to Michael's point at the beginning, we are not going to make progress in any avenue if we aren't having conversations.
So Christina, you can pull down the poll results, but I just want to say these are pretty common results based on us running the survey across many audiences. And let me see if I can shut this down. Okay, so hopefully the poll results are gone, and I do want to dig into the next slide. And it's safe to say as we as a society still have many inclusion and diversity problems to solve. And as usual, you know, Einstein is prophetic. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. I don't think anything on this topic could be more relevant. This is where what I like to call the social entrepreneur actually comes into play. And as we know, entrepreneurship is about identifying opportunities to make change and then following through to deliver solutions in that context. The social entrepreneur, which is what I'm hopeful all of us want to be here on this engagement or this call, the social entrepreneur does this by delivering safe zones for difficult conversations. Social entrepreneur delivers situations where people will feel listened to, feel supported, and where minds can be changed through experiences that the social entrepreneur is helping create. Now, like with any entrepreneurship, it's uncomfortable and it's often met with skepticism. Wins are not quick and they require a lot of work and long-term commitment. And this is key, and the social entrepreneur should go into situations recognizing that the mind that often needs to be changed is that of the social entrepreneur, him or herself. It is actually us oftentimes that needs our mind changed when we're creating these environments. The road to success involves immersing ourselves through the eyes of others who may not be like you, who may have different experiences and may have differing opinions. And we have to account for that. Difficult conversations in the diversity and inclusion space require the interactions of more than one social entrepreneur to be successful. Think about that. We've just articulated a couple of things or characteristics that make us all social entrepreneurs when we create the safe space. But in order to actually make change, we need more than one social entrepreneur in these conversations. So the trick is to be savvy and identify when you're in such company, and then use that as an opportunity to help make change. But be wary. Be wary of confusing like-mindedness, meaning everybody thinks like I do, as an indicator of a social entrepreneur community. Differences of opinion are encouraged in these environments and actually should be sought after in order to be a proper social entrepreneur. Michelle, you want to flip to the next slide? So the person who misunderstands is most often you. This is probably the most important tenet of IND conversations. It's because we all come to conversations with opinions and biases that are preloaded based on our own experiences and our own culture. Our minds work like the catches on our computer. We preload information, and that allows us to speed the processing of subsequent information. Oftentimes, that preloaded information is wrought with biases. My son who played the girl, I'll tell you a quick story. My son and I are as close as any father and son could possibly be. He's now 16 years old. Amongst the many things he does as a teenager, he's a video gamer. And during the football off season, he often plays video games with his football teammates. One such off season about 3 years ago, I'd walk past his room and I'd often seeing him play the girl character, the girl AI on Fortnite. So I walked past his room and 9 times out of 10, he was the girl AI on Fortnite, the video game. Well, this was unnerving for me being a 50-something-year-old man. Number one, these are his football teammates that he's playing with and his friends. What are they gonna think of him? I unconsciously thought back to the days when I was a kid, and you never, ever, ever, when I was a kid, wanted to be the girl. If you heard the terms like you play like a girl, you throw like a girl, or you're a sissy, it was just horrible. It was terrible. So I didn't know whether or not to be concerned about my son, and I was letting myself be worried about what environment he was creating for himself by always being the girl character. My own biases were at play and I didn't realize it. So one day I asked him, I confronted him and I said, why do you always play the girl? Now notice, I didn't say, why do you always play that particular AI? I emphasized, why do you play the girl? Well, he was particularly PO'd. He was very angry, and rightfully so. And he immediately read through the implications of my question. And his response to me was, what difference does it make is that if the AI is a girl or a boy? He said that my thinking was old manish, and it didn't matter what the gender of the AI was that he was playing. And then he also conveyed to me that he interpreted my comment or my question as me implying that he was homosexual. So just by me asking the question the way I did, I immediately put him on the back foot. And then he explained to me that the reason that he played that particular AI character is because she had his favorite weapon, and she was the only character in the game that had that weapon. And that was the weapon that was best suited to his skill set in the game to make him successful. And what I realized at that moment is that his perspective was completely different than mine, and I was completely blind to it. My biases from my own experiences led to my thinking, and it led me to make assumptions about what he was doing and how it was impacting him. And also realized that I communicated that bias by the way I asked the question. Upon reflection, it was wrong, and he was correct to be PO'd about the way I approached him with this question. So think about this the next time you have your own interaction with someone on a topic, and you may be bringing your own biases to play. And that could be in a business environment. It could be with your wife, it could be with your kids, it could be with your parents, it could be with a colleague. But think about the fact that you're bringing your own biases to the conversation and that other people may have a completely different point of view. Michelle, you want to flip to the next slide?
Here we go. Sorry, I did, but I was having trouble. Sorry about that. So the next one, most motivations are sincere. So I have this belief, this really strong felt in my heart belief that I try to carry with me. And I try to really use this belief when I'm having some of these conversations. And that belief is that 99.9% of people are good, rational human beings, and they mean well. And so while I may not always agree with everyone's position, deep down, there is probably something we have in common. There is more than likely a sincere motivation. And so if you think about that and you think about that as you start to approach conversations, when you're having a conversation with someone and it is clear you absolutely disagree, when you approach it with, this is a good person, you kind of diffuse that fight mechanism in your body, right? In your brain, and you set a stage for common ground. You set a stage where you can have a conversation where you're actually opening yourself up to listen, to really hear what they're saying, and to get deeper understanding. As Michael said, we all have biases from experiences, from anything. You know, our brain creates biases without us even knowing it, right? We do a whole session on unconscious biases that we have. And so when you take a pause and you really take a minute and say, all right, this is a good, rational person, I want to have a conversation and I want to learn more. And one of the things, you know, they mentioned at the beginning that we do a lot in our Michigan market around I&D. And one of the things that we do strives from one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou at all time: when we know better, we do better, right? And so a lot of these, when someone says something that is maybe hurtful to you or offensive in some way, a lot of times it's just because they just don't know, right? They don't know better. And so we do this process in our office, and we call it Did You Know? And so this is where we ask colleagues to share some personal story, something, a religious holiday that's meaningful to them, a family tradition at a time of year that's meaningful to them, something that's meaningful to them. And we ask them to share a couple of sentences about why it's personally important to you, who you are, you know, so it gives colleagues a chance to get to know someone new, someone different. And then we have a template at the bottom that just says, what is this? Why do we celebrate it? Why is it celebrated? Is there local celebrations or local information that I could participate in or get more information of? And can I contact you, you know, the person who was willing to share their story? And so about this time last year, we had a colleague and we asked her to share a Did You Know on the Jewish high holidays, which, as you know, are going on right now. And so this colleague wrote up her personal story, said, you know, why it was meaningful to her, some of her family traditions. And then in the templated part, she wrote out, you know, what it meant from a religious perspective. And in writing it out, she wrote, when she wrote God, she wrote capital G/D. And so after sending it out, and which this often happens, colleagues will respond back, thanks for sharing, you know, this was great information. And she got a lot of those. but she got two colleagues who asked her questions. The first colleague sent a note and said, I don't even know what the point of these things are. If you can't say what you believe, like if you can't even write out his name and say what you believe, what are we even doing this for? And the second colleague said, I'm really curious. I've, been a part of various religions. I know people from all sorts of different religions. I've never seen it spelled out that way. Could you tell me a little bit? I'm curious, why did you do that? And to the colleague who wrote the email's credit, she answered both colleagues the same way. And, think for a minute, if you received that first note, your instinct is to just lash back, right? Is to just be like, well, stop being such a jerk. Here's why I did it, right? But to the colleague's credit, she responded to both in the same way. And she said, many Jewish people, myself included, I'm not going to say all, believe that we should not spell out his name on anything that can be thrown out or discarded because it's seen as disrespectful. And so I have always, if I'm writing something in an email, which could easily have been discarded, written it that way because that's in line with my beliefs. And so the first person didn't really respond, just sort of said thank you. And I'm very hopeful that they learned there might be a better way to approach that question the next time. But the second colleague had another interaction back and was like, wow, like that's the coolest thing. I had never heard that before. What a great way to do it. And they had this nice interaction back and forth. And so to that point, when you think about what the colleague was doing, she was creating an experience, right? The goal of all of this is to create an experience, to, as Michael said, create a safe space. We have this part of our brain, the amygdala, and if we feel surprised or attacked or judged or in danger, all that it does is fight or flight. It cannot be logical. It cannot hear rational things that are saying because your physiological self needs to protect itself. And so you are going to fight or flight. And so if you approach these conversations in that way, if you lash out and if you lash back, you haven't created an experience. You haven't created a safe space where someone feels heard, where they feel understood, where they feel safe. We can't learn if we don't feel safe, right? That part of our brain won't even turn on. And so while someone may have said something that is just in your mind absolutely terrible, if the goal is to get them not to say terrible things in your mind, you need to create a safe space. You need to go at it with, this is a good, rational person, and I need to understand why they said that. I need to understand why they think that. And I need to help them understand that maybe there's a better way, or maybe there's another way, or maybe, as Michael said, I will learn, as in the example of my first colleague, that I had it completely wrong. She wasn't being disrespectful or trying to hide her beliefs. She was actually very visibly living them out. One of the things you may have read from my bio is I have a daughter with Down syndrome, and so she is 11 now. But over the years since she has been born, I hear a lot of colleagues, a lot of people, a lot of friends use the R word. And for the longest time, I really struggled internally to like, how do I help? And correct isn't the right word, but how do I help them understand or to consider using a different word? And I felt like if I pointed it out, the person would feel terrible and they'd feel judged and they'd think I thought they were a bad person, when none of that is true, right? That is a word that, I know where I grew up, it was used all the time. And I probably didn't even know what it meant, right? It was just part of the words that were used. And so we were in a meeting with a group of colleagues, and a colleague said something, not that word, but said something similar. And I had asked a friend of mine who knew this colleague as well, I'm like, would you mind saying something to the person? Because I don't want to say it because I feel like they'll feel judged or they'll feel bad about it. And I don't want the person to feel bad. I just kind of want them to think a little differently. And this colleague was like, you know what, I really don't feel comfortable doing that. And so while I was sort of disappointed and, lesson to be an ally, when someone asks you for help, give it, I started thinking about how could I express please don't use that. How could I express that in a way that would not make the person feel judged, right? That would create an experience, a safe place for them to learn. So not surprising, I've had lots of opportunities since that moment to have a conversation. And this one particular time I was sitting with a very close friend, probably known this person for 20, 25 years, knows my daughter, loves my daughter. My daughter even calls her auntie. And she used the R word. She was telling a story about someone, about how her daughter felt, and she used the word, and then she used it again, and she used it again. And so I very nicely, as sweet as I could, just said, hey, please don't use that word. Could you pick a different word? And because I didn't yell at her or say, what do you mean? You don't love you don't love my daughter. You don't love Caitlin. How could you be so insensitive, right? She paused for a second and she said, wow, I'm sorry. Like, she didn't even realize that it was part of her words, right? She didn't even realize that she used it. She didn't realize what it meant. She didn't realize that it could be, hurtful to me or, to my daughter or to others. And she said, gosh, you must think I'm a jerk. And I was like, no, I really don't. And I didn't think she was a jerk because I knew she was a good person. She just needed, in this instance, to know better. And so I could help her. So it's really important as you think about these couple of tenets, make it safe. And that's hard. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, especially when we feel attacked or we feel hurt or we just think someone is so absolutely wrong. It's hard. Give yourself a pause, create the safe space. And when you see it veering off of the safe space, when you see someone getting upset or shutting down or starting to attack, take a step back. Use words like, I'm not trying to say this. I'm not judging you. I don't think you're a bad person. I'm trying to understand, right? Bring it back to safety.
So don't be the fly. Have you ever chased that pesky fly around your house with your homemade fly swatter? You ball up a magazine or whatever. After you miss the initial kill, so the fly lands, you get your homemade fly swatter, you swing and you miss. And then only after you track the fly from corner to corner to corner of the house or the room, they land right back in the same place where you missed the initial kill. And it's whack, dead fly. So in the end, what happened? The fly was stupid enough to land right back in the same place. They landed right back in the same spot that almost got it killed in the first place. It didn't learn. My son, who played the girl, a few weeks ago, he gets a call at 1:30 in the morning from someone, and it's a school night. And I expect whoever called him on the other end to be a girl, and it's a boy. So of course I confront him and I go, why are you getting a call from a boy in the middle of the night? Whack, I was the fly. Immediately, I landed right back in the same place I did before at the prior conversation that I told you about, and whack, he hit me and he killed me because I was making presumptions based on my biases on what he was doing, talking to someone who was a quote unquote boy in the middle of the night. And my bias was, it would have been okay if it was a girl calling him at 1:30 in the morning in the middle of the night on a school night, but it was a boy. And why was it a boy? So once I realized that I had made the don't be the fly mistake and I created a safe space, we had a conversation, and we had a pretty deep conversation. And what I learned from him, once he explained to me that my implication by the question was, again, implying that he was homosexual and that he was completely straight, is that his point of view on gay, LGBTQ, et cetera, was it doesn't matter what people's sexual preference is. People should love who they want. And who was I or anybody else to question people's preferences? And that was his first point. And then as I dug further, I also learned that what he was actually doing is he was helping one of his best friends, who was only 15, make the transformation from being a boy to being a girl. In his mind, his friend, Ian, who now wants to be called Naya, was making the transformation from boy to girl, and my son had been helping him through that transformation. And we received within a couple of weeks before that, a note from now Naya's parents thanking us for my son Trey's support for Naya. And we had no idea what that meant. But in that moment, when I was talking to my son, I completely understood where that note from Naya's parents had come from a few weeks before. And what I realized with this interaction with him is two things. One is, again, my biases had put me in a bad position with him when I was trying to approach him with a conversation that could potentially have been difficult. It was difficult. I was mad it was getting a call at 1:30 in the morning on school night, no matter who it was calling. Number two, I had to back off of my bias to create a safe space for him so he can really explain to me what was going on in his point of view. And then number three, and the most powerful, was that I learned that my son was actually creating a safe space for someone else who was going through a challenge in their own lives that relates to diversity and inclusion. And that was a key learning for me. So if you take that story and you couple it with Michelle's story, where her friend was trying to understand how not to use the R word, there was a safe space for conversation in each one of those environments. And Michelle's friend won't use the R word going forward. She's not going to be the fly and land in the same place again. And I, with my son, I'm not going to go down this path again of asking him questions that preconceive some of his own personal preferences and things of that nature. So again, it's just something to take away as you're having conversations with other people. Be courageous. Don't be afraid to go places where you haven't been before, and listen first before you apply your own opinions and biases. Michelle, back over to you.
All right, so now we've given you a couple of different mind frames to think about things. We want to leave you with 5 tools to put in your toolkit, just some things to think about. So the first being engage in dialogue, not to debate, not debate. You're not going to win. Believe me, I have got to be one of the most competitive people on the planet. In these conversations, the person is not going to be like, you're right, you're a genius. That is not winning, right? Winning is when you both leave the conversation learning something, having a little more respect and understanding for each other, and figuring out how to move forward. That's the win, right? So when you go in, I'm gonna put them in their place. I am gonna tell them what they've done wrong. You're going in all the wrong way. That's what makes these conversations uncomfortable. Be okay with a little discomfort. They're hard conversations. Go back to some of that, the polling questions, right? I'm afraid I don't know all the answers. I got news for you. You don't know all the answers. They're not out there. None of us knows everything. But if we don't have the conversation, if we don't put ourselves out there and try to take a little risk, we can't grow. We can't get better. Assuming positive intent. Remember my rule, right? 99.9% of people are good. When you are talking to someone, think about a time when you've received kind of constructive feedback, maybe something at work, maybe from something, in other ways. When you knew the person really cared about you, when you knew the person had only your best intentions at heart, you could hear what they said. You could hear it. You know when someone is giving you benefit of the doubt and questioning versus accusing. Don't be the accuser. Give benefit of the doubt. Clarify, right? Back to, we can build fabulous stories in our heads. We can say, this happened, and that means this person is this, and this. Nope. Kind of go back to the facts. Clarify. The facts, as you understand them, may not actually be the facts. So really think about it. And then lastly, be willing to admit a mistake. We don't have all of the answers. We don't have the same experience everyone has. We don't know everything everyone else knows. So when you are willing to admit a mistake, you do 2 things. 1, you put yourself out there and you give yourself a chance to learn and grow. But 2, as a leader, you actually model it's okay to make a mistake. And that's really important, right? We've all had leaders who say, it's okay, it's okay that you do this, or, think about working mothers, right? It's okay that you leave early. It's okay that you leave early. But if your boss never leaves early, if your boss is on all the time, do you really believe them when they say it's okay? So you have to model that behavior. And I have a great example of this. We, as part of our, kind of did you know, in our learning for everyone, we sent out an email on the Chinese New Year. And I got an email from another office, and, you know, I was very busy that day. So I assumed whatever came from the other office, I assumed it was good. I mean, they sent it out. Somebody there read it. I had 2 or 3 folks read it, and I shipped it out. Well, something was wrong in the email. I can't remember if it was a fact wrong or I had something wrong. And I had a colleague send me a note, and she was kind of upset. She's like, you know, this is I&D. If you're going to send out an email like this, you got to get it right. And I was like, you're right. I do have to get it right. And I didn't know. And you just taught me something. So I resent out the email to the whole office. And I said, I had a colleague point out that we misspoke and we said something wrong in this email. And here's what it should have said instead. You know, here's what we should have written instead. And thank you to this colleague who did it. And then I closed with, this is what I&D is all about, right? We're gonna make mistakes, and we have to give each other a little bit of grace and a little bit of benefit of the doubt so that we can all grow from it. Because if I had just been like, oh, well, you know, I made the mistake, then not everybody, or gosh, I can't tell the whole office I'm the market leader, I can't make mistakes, right? I just gave everybody a little bit of freedom to do something and modeled how we give each other a little bit of grace. And that's what the conversations are all about. And on that theme, one of the things that we've been doing as we're on our I&D journey in our offices is many of us have spent some time with Emmanuel Acho's Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Not sure if any of you have seen it, but it's really fantastic. And one of the things he says is that when you're talking and when you're having these conversations, you need 3 things. You need to speak truth with love and grace. And I love that, because think about it. We can all think about the person who only talks to us with love and grace, never tells us the truth, right? While that person's good for our ego now and then, maybe at the beginning, you're wonderful, you've done this, you're fantastic, blah, blah, blah. Do we really believe that person? Over time, do we really trust what they're saying? Because we all know deep down we're not perfect, right? We have to have done something that needs correcting, something that we could have done better. So just love and grace isn't enough. And truth with no love and grace, well, that sends us into fight or flight. We haven't heard anything you've said, because now you're judging us and you think I'm a bad person, and I have to defend that because I am not a bad person and I did not do anything wrong. So the concept of talking with all 3 of these things, of talking truth with love and grace, gives us an opportunity to grow. It gives us an opportunity to create that safe space, to dispel some of those fears, and really just reframe, right? Calm ourselves down from whatever has given us a visceral reaction, calm ourselves down and talk calmly. And before we go into questions, we just want to kind of close it out with this. I think we're getting close on time too. So I want to close with this quote from Nelson Mandela. And, you know, go back to the poll. What was the poll? We call these brave conversations because we're afraid, because we have fear. And we could take 2 choices with that fear. We could do nothing, and we could not talk to anyone. And I'm just not going to say those things because I might offend somebody, and I might say the wrong thing, and I might. And if I do that, I'm not going to grow. I'm certainly not going to learn. I'm not going to expand my thinking in any way, right? Or I could try to triumph over the fear, right? So he says, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid. We all feel afraid, but he who conquers the fear. So we want to leave you with that. I think we may have, Christina, you tell me if we have time for a few questions at the end. But really, if I have to kind of sum it all up, let me see, can I see all of you now? I think I can see you. Okay, good.
Yeah.
If I have to, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thanks for this really important topic and excellent conversation. We do have time. We have about 5 minutes. If anyone wants to unmute, I just gave everybody the ability to unmute if you'd like to ask your question live, or feel free to put it in the chat, and we'd love to get those answers and have a conversation around it. Don't see anything yet. Okay. So Michelle and Michael, thank you so much for your time and for this incredible topic. I'm curious, as you've been doing this work, what has been maybe one of like the biggest aha moments in having these conversations, you know, like that you just like, you always go back to this moment where you're like, this is it, like this is what this is about. I'm curious what that has been for you.
I'll go first, Michael, and then you can pile on. Sound okay? So for me, it's two things. Specifically around the conversation, it's this good, rational person, right? I mean, I can go back to so many times in my career when I was trying to give feedback and I created and wove this fantastic story of this person and they were terrible and they were wronging us. And when I take a step back and say, this is a good person, like they want to be successful. They're not trying to cause us harm. It changes my whole perspective, right? It gives me a pause. And then I think secondly, around just I&D in general, but you heard at the beginning, I'm an actuary, right? So there's a problem and we solve it. That's how it works, right? There is a problem and you solve it. And what I've learned on the I&D journey is you're not done, right? We're not done. We're never done. We are going to continue, right? It's a continuous learning. The problem is not going to be solved today, tomorrow, or right? We are going to continuously grow. And so for myself, realizing how do I create an environment where this can go on and on and on, as opposed to, all right, I'm going to tackle this problem. We're going to fix it and we're going to find a new one to solve.
Perfect.
Michael, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think a couple questions came through on the chat.
Yeah, we do. We've got 3 questions now in the chat. I did receive one in private on my end. So if I could just read that one really quick. For those of us that are afraid to start the conversation, how can we start the conversation without offending someone?
You know, I think there's a couple of things. Michael, do you want to go first because I'm yammering on, or do you want me to go?
Oh, I'll just say an overarching theme that I have that I think answers a couple of chat questions, including that one. One is one of the chat questions was, how do you embed tools in the organization? The other is, how do you overcome feeling your own privilege? And then there's this question that Christina just asked. I believe in I&D one person at a time, but I didn't tell you any of my business stories, but it really, to me, truly is one person at a time. You don't need a program. You know, it's great when organizations have them. It's great when the CEO is behind it and there's this big thing that gets rolled out and all that. That's all fantastic. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one person at a time. And it's the interaction you have with each individual that makes the change. Find your other social entrepreneurs out there. That's what will make the change, not the big program. And then, you know, to the question of how do you overcome the feeling of own privilege? You don't overcome it if you don't have to overcome it if you realize it might present some biases for you that you might be unconscious about. And if you go into the conversation realizing you may have some unconscious biases because of the fact that, quote unquote, you feel privileged or you are privileged, then you quickly get over that issue because you switch to listening to the other person's point of view.
Yeah, I think the same. To add on to Michael's example about embedding tools kind of in the organization. You know, we work with a lot of clients in this area, and you know, I was talking to a client and she said, you know, this is great. We've got people kind of speaking up when they feel things aren't going right, et cetera, et cetera. But as we investigate, we realize it's a misunderstanding, and then we get the 2 people. But now we're left with 2 people, one who kind of told on another, one who's feeling judged and that they've done something wrong, and the relationship between the 2 is a little fractured. And so to Michael's point, I said to the client, what you want to get to is you want that person to feel comfortable going to the person who said something that they felt, you know, was hurtful or whatever, and having a conversation one-on-one, right? They don't, they don't have to report it, that they can have the conversation and realize there's some shared learning between the two of them. And then again, the person who said something is going to be in a way safer space than if HR is coming to them saying, we've heard you've done something, right? They're in a way safer space to learn and change their behavior.
And if we have time for one more, and there's one that says, how do you break down barriers when so much of it is based on perception of the way someone looks or behaves?
Do you want to go, Michael, and then I can add?
Michelle, maybe I'll go first. I'll just say that, you know, if there were a magic pill answer to any of these questions, you know, it wouldn't be a problem in the first place. So I don't have a magic pill answer for that question. How do you break down the barriers? Except to say you have to be curious. You know, we led this session today with a bunch of headlines that hopefully spark some anger or interest or bias or whatever in each one of us, because we all have a position and a point of view on those. You have to go into these conversations leaving that point of view at the door, and you have to listen to the other people, the other person engaged in the conversation. And the reason I said earlier on is you need more than one social entrepreneur in order to really make change, is because both people or multiple people in that conversation have to leave their biases at the door to actually have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And in some situations, you find yourself as the only social entrepreneur in an interaction, nobody else is, and you're not going to make any change. Well, then your role switches to provide education and provide additional data. You realize you don't change minds, but this is my opportunity to provide education or additional data, and that's it. And that's a building block. Maybe down the road, somebody will change their mind. So that's a long way to answer the question. No magic pill, but do your best to leave biases at the door, because we all have them.
And the only thing I'll add is purposely seek out people who are different than you. Spend time with people who are different than you. We all gravitate towards people who are like us because we laugh at the same jokes and we all think it's funny and blah, blah, blah. Find people who are different from you. You will have deeper, better relationships with those people.
Thanks so much. Well, Michelle, Michael, thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you for everyone who joined us.